Hello everybody, Mike Portnoy here. It's raining on the streets of New York City, as a song once said. Anyway, the origins of the Liquid Tension Experiment, I suppose, goes back to where my relationship with Magna Carta Records began, and Pete Morticelli and Mike Varney over at the label. And my relationship with them began in 1996, I believe, when they called me to participate in the Rush tribute album that they were doing, Working Man. And that session was the first time that any Dream Theater members had sort of left the family for an outside environment and to do an outside session. But in any case, that session was really great for me because I worked with Billy Sheehan. And Billy and I spent almost a week together in San Francisco, working out the tracks, playing together, getting to know each other, and you know, messing with the arrangements of the songs for the tribute album. So in any case, that was a great experience, and it was a lot of fun to work outside of the normal confines of Dream Theater, which I had become so accustomed to for 10 years at that point. After working on that project with Billy, the Magna Carta guys came back to me and said, well, how'd you like to do something else? And they offered me the opportunity to put together a project with the players of my choice, and basically asked me for a wish list of all the different players I'd like to work with. And after months and months of phone calls and certain people being available and certain people not being available and aligning different schedules, finally, towards the end of 1997, to make a long story short, we found ourselves set up and ready to go with the lineup of myself, the great Tony Levin on bass, who I had always wanted to work with, always admired all of his work, obviously with Peter Gabriel and King Crimson, but then also the stuff he did with Pink Floyd and Yes and John Lennon and Paul Simon. Obviously he had the experience to really play with anybody. On keyboards, I chose Jordan Rudess, who to me is the most amazing talent to have ever touched a keyboard. He's just an absolute, total, intense prodigy. He was admitted to Juilliard at the age of 9, so it gives you an idea of the type of player he is. After going through a big list of guitar players and none of them ever quite panning out, my wife actually suggested to me to consider using John in this project. And at first I wanted to keep the project completely separate from Dream Theater, but on second thought it really made a lot of sense because John and I have had such a long history together and such a writing chemistry that we figured it would really enhance this outside project, and ultimately it really did. So I'm really glad that John ended up coming on board. So the project kind of started almost as a solo project of mine, but it was obvious the minute that we started collaborating that it was going to become a full collaborative band type project, and that's exactly what happened. And once we hit the studio, we had 1 week to create music that was intense, eclectic, instrumental, and always exciting. So it was a great experience. Well, here we are in beautiful Millbrook, New York, upstate New York, at Millbrook Sound Studios, and this is the place where we made Liquid Tension Experiment 1 and 2. So let me take you inside to take a look at the studio and see where the magic and mayhem all took place. Come on in. As we enter the halls of Millbrook Studios, the video camera makes its unveiling.
Wow.
These are two of the masterminds behind this project.
Good morning. Say something brilliant, Jordan.
Are you unveiling another toy to play with?
In the mail.
A bow.
A bow in the mail. Well, you know what? Let's play, run tape. Don't stop the tape.
Okay.
We'll play such a great thing, you're going to jump to the drums.
Okay.
Jump.
I'm not going to be able to hold the camera any
You
longer.
have to just film it. See if you can resist playing to this.
One, two.
You stop.
I like it already. That's great. The idea behind the music was it was going to be instrumental music. We were going to try to be very technical, try to be very progressive, but at the same time be very melodic. And most importantly, be very spontaneous. There were portions of the recording process that were completely improvised, very jam-oriented things, and then there were, you know, several songs that were written, but even those songs were very spontaneous. This is the writing process. Normally in a Dream Theater context, this writing process will last days, weeks, sometimes months. Here we are reduced to mere minutes and hours, so we have to be creative and quick. C-sharp minor part?
No. No.
This is the A minor?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is A minor.
The entire project was a lot of fun, and I'm going to spend some time now playing through a lot of the tracks from both the first Liquid Tension and the second Liquid Tension albums. And here we go. Let's make our way into the drum room. Well, here we are in the drum room at Millbrook Studios, and this is where all the magic, all of the writing and recording for both Liquid Tension albums were done. And as you can see, I have a much smaller kit here than what I usually play with Dream Theater. And the main reason for that, to be completely honest, is that when the Liquid Tension 1 session was booked, Dream Theater had just finished some shows in Brazil, and my big kit was still being shipped, so I needed to put together an alternate kit to use in the studio. And actually, I'm really glad that I went with a different kit as opposed to my usual Dream Theater kit, because it gave me a whole fresh perspective on creating parts and the writing process. Let me tell you a little bit about this setup. As you can see, it's one bass drum, which was very different for me, and it has a much different feel playing one bass drum than playing two kicks. And for 10, 15 years, however long it's been, I've always played with two bass drums. So it was a little bit of a different approach for me to get used to the feel of double kick on one bass drum. And I kind of adapted pretty quickly, and I was able to do a lot of the things that I usually do with Dream Theater on the two bass drums. And what I did here was I actually, because I had half of the big drum set, I actually was left with only a couple toms. So I added a set of timbalitos and used those as my two high toms. So I actually have a set of timbalitos, a 12-inch rack tom, I believe it's a 14-inch floor tom, and an 18-inch floor tom. And this was also the first time I was able to set up a kit with floor toms on both my left and right. And it gave me some pretty cool possibilities with coming up with some of the parts. One thing I had to adjust to when playing a smaller setup with a single bass drum was the way that the drums were angled. And what I did was I've spent so many years playing a double bass setup where I have the snare in the center, and then my two kick drums, and then the toms revolving around it to create some sort of symmetrical setup. It's kind of a little asymmetrical when you're playing with one bass drum because you're kind of angled a certain way. So what I did was I actually set it up as if it was a double bass drum. So with my left pedal, I actually positioned it as if there was another bass drum here to my left, and I put the snare in the center, and I based the toms around it as if I was playing a double bass setup, but with only one bass drum. So my main kick is actually angled out. Okay, once I decided on the drum configuration, I had to gather a set of cymbals. And of course, I have a wide variety of Sabian cymbals here with me. And even though the drum configuration was scaled down, I did use a lot of cymbals as well, because I like to have that variety in cymbal land. So as you can see, there's a wide variety, and there's a bunch of my new custom cymbals on this setup. These exact custom creations were used on both Liquid Tension albums. So this setup was there for both of those albums, but since then I have adapted it to the cymbal line that I'm going to be putting out with Sabian in the year 2000. And it's the Sabian Max line, and that consists of a 7-inch splash, a 9-inch splash, an 11-inch splash. And on this kit, I have 2 of the 3 sets of Max Staxes that we're going to have. And here's the low set, which is a 12 China and a 14 crash, and a 10 China and a 10 crash. So that's a low Stax, and this is a medium Stax. And then in terms of crashes, I have a 16, a 17, and a 19, and 1 China, and 1 ride, which is my 22-inch HH Rock ride, which is used on both kits, the Dream Theater kit and the Liquid Tension kit, and a set of 13-inch hats as opposed to 14s, which I use with Dream Theater, and a bell. Anyway, that's the setup that we have here, and it was a real nice change of pace for me to be playing on a smaller kit. The first taste I had of scaling down was on the Falling Into Infinity album, when I actually had 2 drum sets set up in the studio. And we did that album a few months before the Liquid Tension 1 session. And I enjoyed myself so much on the small kit that it was really nice to be able to play some real progressive parts on a kit of this size. And I'm really glad that I did it, because it gave me a whole fresh perspective as opposed to just playing, you know, on the usual Dream Theater environment. So I was able to apply myself kind of differently. Well, this is where it all began. In this room, behind this kit, this is where we first gathered and began the Liquid Tension experiment in the fall of '97. And we knew we wanted to come right out of the bag with something that was going to slap you in the face and tell you that we weren't messing around. So the very first thing we wrote was Paradigm Shift. And it's the very first thing you hear on the album, and I guess it was everybody's very first taste of the Liquid Tension experiment. So I'm going to play a bit of that for you now, and then I'll come back and break some of it down for you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, the most immediate thing that jumps out and grabs you right by the throat is that opening bit. And not to pat myself on the back, but that was something that I had, and it was revolved around a drum pattern. And basically, when we got together to write the song, we had the idea of coming out full guns blazing. So there was no better way than just to have this completely sick unison thing. So I had this pattern. Probably just came up with it on the spot, I'm sure. And then those guys, as incredible as they are, just completely doubled it, with ease. So let me break down that pattern for you right now. Okay, the pattern, like so many of these patterns that I play, is broken up between the snare and the kick drums. And I'll cut this into two pieces. The first piece is a pattern that happens 3 times, and it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 6, and 2. So that's 2 on the snare, 2 on the kicks, 6 on the snare, 2 on the kicks. Let me play that for you. 3, 4. You put them together, and they sound like this. Okay, now the second half of this is a pattern of 6 on the snare, 2 on the kick drum, then 6 on the first timbali, 6 on the second timbali, and then 4 on the snare. So let me play that now for you. Now let me put the 2 together. So we're going to have the first half and the second half put together, and there you have the opening to Paradigm Shift. I'll play at normal speed, and then I'll slow it down, then bring it back up to speed. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was great.
I think that slinks.
That was awesome.
What I'd like to do is, before I get too into all of the parts I'm going to break down, I would like to just open up my toolbox or my bag of tricks and give you a brief layout of the sort of fills that I like to use a lot. And you'll notice them throughout all of my records, all the songs I play. Whenever I'm looking for a fill, a lot of them are developed around these patterns which I have, which are patterns between the hands and the feet in groups of 2s, 4s, and 6s, sometimes even 8s. And basically they sound like this. Now, if I was to slow that, when you play him up to speed, it sounds like Fred Flintstone starting his car after a binge at the bowling alley. But anyway, when you slow them down, what they are actual just patterns of 2s, 4s, 6s, and you could break them up any way you'd like. The easiest way to start to get comfortable with them is to do them just on the snare and the kick drums. So, for instance, a 2 and 2 pattern would sound like this. a 4-2 pattern would sound like. A 6-2 pattern would sound like. So anyway, these are 3 variations amongst many which I utilize all the time. So throughout this video, you'll see me talking about them, breaking them down. But I just wanted you to become aware of them because it is a big part of my style and a big part of my fills. And once I started developing some of these type of ideas on the drums, I would just come up with different patterns. I would do a 2-2 and a 4-2, or a 4-2 and a 6-2, and then I would maybe break up the snare and the tom. You know, if I was doing a 4-2 rather than just doing 4 on the snare, I would go maybe snare, tom, kick, kick. You know, breaking them up around the toms, you could do all sorts of different combinations, and it's a matter of just experimenting and getting comfortable with the patterns. So anyway, this is a big part of my toolbox and my bag of tricks that you should be made aware of before we get any further into some of these riffs and parts. One of my favorite moments on the second Liquid Tension album is the 17-minute extravaganza, When the Water Breaks. And working in the format of a very long song, to me, is always the most rewarding because you could throw in so many different ideas and styles and kind of just go for it and throw everything but the kitchen sink in. And this song was definitely one of those types of songs. And I'm going to actually play through a portion of that song right now. And the portion that I'm going to play through right now begins with a bit of a drum solo. And like I've said, what I played on the album, so much of it was spontaneously created that it's hard for me to go back and remember exactly what I did because so much of it was on the spot. So the drum solos in this particular section of When the Water Breaks were completely improvised. So I don't think I'd be able to ever reproduce them properly right now. So what I'm going to do is actually just go for it again and improvise again. And what we did when creating this part was Tony Levin just laid down a solid ostinato pattern on the bass, and it was in 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or you can count it in threes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In any case, he laid that down a solid foundation, and I just went completely out and went berserk on top of it. So I'm going to start off with that piece with the improv drum solos, and then it's going to move further into the song for a few minutes so you can get a taste of what was going on in that piece. after the big build with the improvised drum solos, I kick into a groove which is actually broken up into 7/8 and 5/8. The rest of the band is continuing with the ostinato that Tony Levin laid down underneath the solos, which was in 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. So after playing solos over 6, when I finally joined back up with the band, rather than joining in a 6 pattern, I tried to make it interesting and played a different subdivision from the rest of the band. So while they continued in 6/4, I broke the pattern up into 1/8 notes. So 6/4 or 6 quarter notes would be equivalent to 12 1/8 notes. So what I did was came up with a way to play a subdivision with 1/8 notes equaling 12 1/8 notes to equal their 6 quarter notes. Anyway, so what I did was this pattern was 7/8 and 5/8, and if you add up the 7 and the 5, that gives you 12, and there are your 12 1/8 notes. So that would be counted 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5. Another thing I like to do is I like to take a particular groove, and then rather than continuing to play it one way, I'll start to phrase it differently around the drums, or maybe use different instruments to bring the groove out. So that groove in 7/8 and 5/8, after I played it 8 times through or whatever it was, then I actually switched the groove up a little bit and started to use different cymbals to play those accents. So I played the same pattern, but then I went to more of an open hi-hat using the medium stack right here to play the same pattern in 7/8 and 5/8. So let me play that for you now. Okay, the last thing that I would like to break down from this excerpt of When the Water Breaks is the drum fill that closes out the section. And once again, this is taken from my traditional bag of tricks, and it utilizes a pattern similar to the one I broke down earlier, based around patterns with the hands and the feet, snare, kick drum, and the toms, and so on. So I'm going to break this down for you. What happened was, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe either Jordan or John were playing this thing on top. This whole pattern on top while we were grooving. We were playing a thing in 7, and they had this strange syncopated pattern on top while we were in 7, and then we decided to end the section with me actually joining in with the pattern and then closing it out. So let me break that pattern down for you. What's going on there? Instead of playing the pattern like I did earlier, solely on the snare and the kick drums, I'm actually breaking the top part up between my snare and left floor tom. So rather than just doing 2 hits on the snare, I'm going right left between the snare and the left floor tom. So the pattern that is starting here, it's 4 sets of 2 and 2, and then 2 and 4. And the 2s on top are always right left, meaning snare and floor tom, and then 2 with the kicks, right left on top again, and then 4 with the kicks. So let me play that for you, and this happens 4 times. 1 2 3. So that's the first half of the pattern, and it does that 4 times. 2 and 2, 2 and 4. Then the ending of the fill is 4 on the snare, 2 with the kick, 4 on the right floor tom, 2 with the kick, 2 toms, 2 snares, cymbal choke. So, once again, 4 on the snare, 2 with the kick, 4 on the floor tom, 2 with the kick, 2 toms, 2 snares, cymbal choke. So let me play that for you now. Now, I'll put the 2 phrases together. So we'll start with the first phrase, and it'll be directly connected to the second phrase. And I'll start with the whole pattern at normal speed, and then I'll slow it down and bring it back up.
piece. You know, we got to establish some sort of hook. We need a radio tune.
I don't believe in stuff.
Excellent.
One of the most exciting aspects for me about the liquid tension experiment was the opportunity to work with the great, legendary Tony Levin on bass and stick. And one of the best memories I have of the first album's session was the duet that he and I did. And we ended up calling it Chris and Kevin's Excellent Adventure for reasons which I won't go into here. But in any case, it was an opportunity for both of us to completely stretch out and improvise. Anyway, so one morning I was fiddling around on the drums, just warming up, and I stumbled upon this pretty cool shuffle groove. And before I had the chance to forget it, I started screaming and yelling into the control room for somebody to roll that. And luckily, I record every session I do. And this was one of those moments where I stumbled into this groove. If I hadn't laid it down on tape, I probably would have forgotten it. It would have never gotten used. Then when the idea came for me and Tony to do a duet, we ended up using this shuffle as the foundation for this little improv thing that he and I did. But anyway, I'd like to break down the Chris and Kevin shuffle groove for you so you could see exactly what I'm doing. The most important element of this groove is the ghost notes, and ghost notes are something that that I think are a real important part of playing. For those of you that don't know what a ghost note is, it's when you're actually playing on the snare, but you're not playing a full impact hit. You're actually just sort of tapping lightly in between the twos and the fours or whatever the big hits are. And that's the biggest part of this Chris and Kevin groove. So let me play it for you at normal tempo, and then I'll slow it down, and you could sort of see what it is that I'm doing here. Now slower.
La la, I can't whistle. La la, la la, la la, la la, la la. Yeah, baby, yeah.
Okay, right now I'm going to play through couple of sections from a track off the second Liquid Tension album called Another Dimension. And both of these sections are taken from the middle of the song when we were able to play around with some odd time signatures. So here we go. Okay, there's a lot going on there, and it's almost all completely dealing with odd time signatures, which is, to me, the most fascinating part of playing drums. So much of my style is revolved around odd time signatures and numbers and counting and arithmetic and so on. And this is a perfect example of that style of playing. What's going on at the beginning of this section is I'm playing what I call a jungle groove between the toms and the snare, and the patterns are alternating back and forth between 4 and 5, and then every fourth bar the 5 is actually becoming a 6. So it's being counted as 4 and 5, 4 and 5, 4 and 5, 4 and 6. Let me play the pattern for you, and I'll count it along so you can understand how to count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see there at the end, all I did was, instead of going a blah-ba-bam on the 5, a triplet on the 5, I went 2 triplets to set up 5 and 6. 5 triplet, 6 triplet, bum. Then, after a full round of jungle grooves going 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 6, I then translate that groove or that metric modulation to more of a ride groove. And I'm also doing some, I think it would be 30-second note accents along with the guitar. So let me play that for you now in the context of the ride pattern. 1, 2, 3. And like I mentioned, there's a fast 30-second note thing happening with the guitar. Just then, for the sake of breaking down the example, I didn't include it, but now I will include it and play it for you. So let me slow that down. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, now I'm going to break down the second piece that I played from Another Dimension. This is very similar to the first piece that I played because it's dealing with a lot of odd time signatures. And what I did was I developed my part the same exact way melodically. What's happening is it's starting with a pattern on the toms, a jungle groove thing, and then it's developing to a ride sort of pattern, and it's very similar in that sense to the previous section, except now this time, instead of counting in 4s and 5s and everything, this is actually dealing with 7s and 4s and 6s. So let me count this out for you. The beginning pattern for this section is actually 7, 4, and 4, and the 7 can be counted as 4 and 3, then 4 and 4. So you can count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first set. So let me play that for you first. 2, 3, 4. was to count that, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, once you get that first step done, there's actually a second step to that whole process, because what's happening is it's the second part of it is going 7, 4, and 6. And all that means is there's an extra 2/8 notes at the end. So as before we were going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Meaning the 4 and the 2 equaling 6. So it's 7, 4, and 6. Basically, it's the exact same pattern, except I'm adding an extra 2 beats at the end. So let me play that for you now. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you put them together without any of the repeats, what you're going to have is 7, 4, 4, 7, 4, 6. So now let me play the entire back-to-back groove for you. 1, 2, 3. Now, once again, like the previous section, what I did was I took that same time signature pattern and then developed it onto a ride groove. So what's happening now is you're having the same thing, 7, 4, 4, 7, 4, 6, but now it's being played in a more groove type fashion. So here we go. I'm going to play that now for you with the ride pattern. 1, 2. Okay, now I'm going to play for you a chunk from Universal Mind, which was from the first Liquid Tension album. And I would like to just start off, before I get into the entire piece, I would like to start off showing the pattern that I'm playing to begin this section. And this follows a piano solo by Jordan Rudess, and then myself and Tony Levin come in with this pattern, which is in 7, 8, 7, and 7. And that's the way it's phrased the whole way through. So it almost feels like it's in 7 the whole time, except for the second bar, we're slipping in an extra 8th note. So let me break that down now for you slowly. I'll slow it down for you now. 1, 2, 3, 4. The way that would be counted is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now after playing that pattern through with Tony 4 times, then I did my usual development, which means, you know, take the pattern and take it to the next stage musically. Sometimes I do that in terms of numbers and breaking up the time signatures differently, or sometimes I just do that in terms of the instrumentation or orchestration with the drums and cymbals. In this case, it was the orchestration. So what I did was I took that pattern and then developed it more to a China sort of thing, very similar to what I did earlier in When the Water Breaks. So let me play that now for you in the developed stage. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that you know the intro and understand, hopefully, how I started this bit off, now you can actually see it in the context of the music, and we'll take it from this point and take it up straight to the end. So here we go, Universal Mind. Well, the future of LTE. It's kind of hard to say where the band will go from this point because Liquid Tension originally started as the opportunity for myself and John to have an outside environment from Dream Theater. And as you know, Jordan Rudess, as a result of the 2 Liquid Tension albums, has since joined Dream Theater full-time. So, you know, 3/4 of Liquid Tension is now 3/5 of Dream Theater. So I really don't see the purpose of making any future studio albums with Liquid Tension because we already have this writing chemistry that we assembled now working full-time in Dream Theater. However, we will always be open and excited about the idea of ever doing live shows. So there are always possibilities of live shows with Liquid Tension in the future. So that would never be counted out. In the meantime, because I no longer have this outside writing environment with Liquid Tension, I've assembled yet another side project, and this is one that I worked on this past summer of '99. It'll be coming out in the winter of 2000. Wow, that's wild. But in any case, this is more of a prog rock type supergroup, and basically I assembled some musicians from other newer progressive bands, musicians who I really admire, even more for their writing talents, more than their playing technical abilities. But in any case, this project has Pete Travis on bass, who's the bass player from Marillion, one of the most melodic bass players I've ever heard. Neil Morse, who is the main writing force and singer and keyboard player for Spock's Beard, and Roine Stolt, who is the guitar player and vocalist and main writing force behind the Swedish band The Flower Kings. And the 4 of us assembled once again at Millbrook for a 10-day period and created an album very much like Liquid Tension in terms of the way it was created, but musically it's very, very different. It's very, very long songs. We have a 30-minute composition on there, and it's very much in the old school vein of Yes and Pink Floyd and the Beatles. All 4 of us are singing, and it gave me a chance to really lay back and do my best Ringo or John Bonham impersonation, which was fun for a change. So that's Liquid Tension's future. That's the future of my latest side project as well. And as far as the future for Dream Theater, as you know, we have a brand new album out, Metropolis 2, Scenes from a Memory. And in case you don't know, see the second video as part of this set, which will focus on all of Dream Theater's music for our latest album, and will give you a glimpse of where we are going in the future. So I hope to see you in that video. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you soon.
This is the real important secret to doing a good album.
Whoa. Look at that steam.
No, that's getting the water out. Now it's ready to steam. You might want to come in for a close-up of this
Okay, I got
when
you.
it happens. And the sound is the greatest. Nothing like the sound you're about to hear.
It's the sound of the heavens brewing.
That's the sound of Super Wonder brew being made. So keep us going for a little while. You're not, I don't think you're in for the close-up.
Oh, trust me, I'm...
Yeah, you're getting this, huh?
single star behind me. A red sky burns ahead. A lonely life below. I wake among the dead. Overwhelming feeling, this being on the strange. I sense a new beginning. I sense a wind of change. Walk with the old useless, people so colorless. Welcome, man, I know my millennium. How many times must I live up this nightmare? Getting down the line, yeah. Oh, I got this feeling. The tide is turning now, baby. A funny feeling. Everything's gonna be alright now.
Dream Theater and Bear Track Studios have had a very long relationship. We actually have recorded many albums here. In addition to our latest album, we also did the Change of Seasons EP here and Images and Words back in 1991. And we have a lot of good memories from this place. You know, I remember being in that drum room, laying down the drum tracks for Pull Me Under, you know, back in '91, and we really had no idea what the future held for us. And it turns out that that ended up being a landmark session for us and really changed a lot of things for us. And it all began here. And this time around, for the Metropolis 2 Scenes from a Memory album, we had the really very cool experience of just being shacked up here. And it's the first time that we actually shacked up in a studio and wrote an album in the studio. In the past, we would be at our home, you know, rehearsal spot, and we'll spend months and months and months writing the material, demoing it, and then go into the studio to record the album. But this time around, we decided to just move into Bear Tracks, and we spent you know, a good part of 1999 here writing and recording the album simultaneously. And that whole writing and recording approach was inspired by the experiences that myself and John Petrucci and Jordan had doing the Liquid Tension albums. It was very interesting, and similar to the Liquid Tension album, where when creating my drum parts, I didn't have too much time to reflect on them. So similarly to the Liquid Tension album, I had to create my drum parts while we were creating the music, and in some cases, you know, the next day I would be laying my drum parts down, you know, and having to record parts that I'm going to live with for the rest of my life, but, you know, only having maybe one day to refine them. So, you know, breaking down some of these drum parts here for the purpose of this video, similarly to the Liquid Tension stuff I did, there's going to be some variations because I didn't have as much time to nail down and completely overanalyze every single drum part. A lot of it was based upon spontaneity and improvisation and live raw energy. So to the best of my capabilities, I'm going to reproduce a lot of those drum parts for you here. In other cases, you'll see some variations, and in all cases, hopefully I will capture the spirit of the song.
my brother, but I love her. I can't keep away from the touch, deception, dishonor. It's calling me back to my home.
There were many things that made writing the new Dream Theater record a lot of fun. First of all, writing a concept album is a format that really was the perfect type of writing format for us, because we were able to write as if it was one giant 75-minute song, and we were able to constantly bring back themes and foreshadow themes and have themes played in different time signatures, which is a way that we've always written anyway within, you know, the context of single songs. Now we were able to do it in the context of a big album. But the other thing that made the writing process so much fun was that we were writing based on a concept of one of our older songs, Metropolis. So throughout the entire writing process, we always had free rein to reference a piece of music or a lyric or anything from the first Metropolis and constantly tie it in. The Dance of Eternity, the instrumental in the album, obviously utilizes a lot of Metropolis bits and pieces, but the song Home, I think, really most of all utilizes all different Metropolis bits and pieces. Being that I wrote the lyrics to this song as well, I was able to write a lot of lyrical references into this. So, you know, for those of you that are insightful readers or lyric listeners, you'll notice lots of references to the original Metropolis. Musically, there's a lot of references to Metropolis in this song. The chorus itself is actually a progression taken from the first Metropolis. The riff that comes out of the first chorus is taken from the first Metropolis. So beyond just the lyrical references and the band's musical references, I took it a step further and even had little drum references throughout the song Home. So for those of you drummers that are familiar with the original Metropolis, I'm sure you've caught a bunch of these little wink winks, but I want to just point out a few in case they slip by you. The first obvious one is the fill that I do leading into the first verse. It's the same fill that I do leading into the first verse of Metropolis Part 1. So let me play that for you now. Okay, after I do that fill leading into the first verse, which is the identical fill from Images and Words, I go into the same groove, just a straight downbeat pump, dum, 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 and then I actually play the Metropolis rhythm on the hi-hat while simultaneously playing the pump, like this. So there was a second drum reference to the original Metropolis. Then coming out of the first verse, I also played the same fill that I played coming out of the first verse of Metropolis Part 1, which is this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me slow that down for you. And even slower. The similarities don't end there. The whole jungle groove that I'm playing on the second verse is the same jungle groove that I play on the second verse of the original Metropolis. So let me play that for you now. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the grooves I'm playing in Home on the second pre-chorus of the song, it's a double bass groove, and it's incorporating playing 16th notes with my right hand on the ride bell and on some of the stacks I have. And basically, I think that was inspired, well, A, by Terry Bozzio, who's always done these type of rhythms. But, you know, once you stack these cymbals, they're such quick-sounding cymbals that you can start to play rhythms on them. So a lot of the grooves that I play on the new Dream Theater album is incorporating 16th note or triplet patterns just on the stacks themselves, just because they're so rhythmic. So let me break down the groove I play on the second pre-chorus of the song. It's playing 16th notes on the bass drums, and I'm playing like straight downbeats on the snare, and then basically I'm just filling out the groove with 16th notes following my feet on my right hand. And the first set is on the ride, then the second set is on the low stack, then I do another one on the ride, then I do one on the medium stack. So let me play it for you at regular speed, and then I'll try to slow it down for you. 1, 2, 3. There's a big fill that happens in the middle of the guitar solo, and it's another one of those traditional Mike Portnoy bag of tricks sort of fills between the hands and the feet. Except what makes this fill actually cool is that the phrasing is backwards. Most of the times when I do these fills, it's starting on the snare and then going around on the toms and the kick drums. But in this particular case, I'm starting on the toms, moving up on the snare. So it's got a real kind of backwards feel to it. And what makes it even cooler is after I laid down my drum tracks, John actually learned it and incorporated it into the guitar solo on top. So it's actually now the two of us doing it together, which is very cool. But anyway, let me play the fill for you at normal speed, then I'll break it down so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, there's another fill that I do towards the end of the song. It's actually at the end of the last chorus before it leads back into the main theme. And it's another one of these fills from the Mike Portnoy toolbox. So I'm going to play the fill for you now, and you'll notice it's very similar to the one I just broke down that's in the middle of the guitar solo, but this is more of a straight-ahead downbeat version. So here we go. So all of these examples were to show you how a drum part could be very memorable by itself even. All of these were grooves that hopefully you picked up on your own without me having to point them out to you. Hopefully when you heard Home for the first time, you caught all of these references. But basically they're an example of how the drums should always be a musical, expressive instrument, not just strictly rhythms, but something that's going to create something memorable, and that could be carried over, you know, even from song to song. One of the things that constantly comes up at my clinics is questions about double bass and double bass technique. And it's something I've become very comfortable with because I've been playing double bass for almost as long as I've been playing drums. And I've always played with two bass drums. So it's just something that's become very natural for me. It seems like it's a natural thing to do, that your left foot should also be as utilized as your right foot. Some of the advice I can give on how to try to develop double bass playing and be able to play it steadily, the very first thing I would recommend is to work with a click track or a metronome. And Tama makes a thing called the Rhythm Watch, which I have mounted right here on my kit. And the Rhythm Watch actually is a very, very valuable tool. And basically, you could program or listen to quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. You could program the different downbeats. It's a great, great tool for practicing any kind of grooves, but for double bass, it's awesome. And one of the most important things with double bass is to start slow. So many drummers sit down and they immediately want to start playing Slayer and Metallica songs, but you have to start from the beginning first and start with those Motley Crue songs and work your way up. And that's the way I developed. I started off learning just straight 16th note patterns, and then slowly, as time went on, I would slowly kick up the metronome and bring it up and slowly start to raise the tempo, and then I started to get more and more comfortable with the quicker speeds. So let me break down for you just the most basic double bass pattern so you could sort of understand the way that it's approached. Okay, I'm going to start with just a basic double bass 16th note pattern. And what I'll do is I'll start with just a single bass, and then I'll show you how you could bring in the left foot on the upbeats. And basically, if you were to be playing with a metronome, if this was your quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4, ba, ba. The eighth notes would be ba, 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 ba. So that's what my right foot is going to be playing. Ba, 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 ba. My left foot is then going to come in on the upbeats. Ba, 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 ba. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, what I was giving you an example of there was you could see that I was bringing the left foot in and out. And when playing these patterns, I'll concentrate on my main kick, in my case the right foot, always being locked in with that metronome, with the downbeat, with the quarter note, with the eighth notes. And no matter what the tempo is, I'll concentrate on my main kick being locked in. And what I was just playing, pulling my left foot in and out, you were able to hear that the right foot was always locked in. So let me show you how you could start to mix it up and play different patterns. Like, for instance, we have a song called Under a Glass Moon off of Images and Words, and that's based off of these double bass patterns. Basically, I'm just playing a straight beat. I'm going to show you how that beat sounds with only one bass drum, and then I'll show you what it sounds like with just a single left kick drum brought in, every couple beats, how it completely changes the feel of the entire groove. So here's the Under a Glass Moon groove with just one foot. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you could hear The Underglass Moon pattern with only one bass drum is really incredibly basic. In fact, it could be the drum beat to an AC/DC song. But as soon as you add in that left foot, now watch the completely different dynamic that it takes on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
The summer sky, underglass moonlight, night awaits the lamb's arrival. Liquid shadows crown, silver teardrops fall, the bright sunsets to her survival.
One of the most challenging sections on the new Dream Theater album is the guitar and keyboard solos at the end of Fatal Tragedy. And this was a section that we called the Shrink and Grow section. Because essentially what was happening is that when we wrote the rhythm tracks, we created a rhythm section that essentially shrunk and took bits away, and then at a certain point it played a unison thing, and then it built itself back up and grew. So there you have Shrink and Grow. So this is the Shrink and Grow section I'm going to play for you. To understand the concept behind it, it's pretty twisted, and it takes a lot of concentration to play. And the fact that John and Jordan are playing completely crazy solos on top of it doesn't help matters for me when I'm trying to concentrate on playing this. But essentially, there's two sections. You have an E section, which is let me check the key. Yeah, very good. How's that for relative pitch? That's the E section. And then the second riff is an F sharp, which is da 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 da. What a phenomenon! What a phenomenon! Anyway, you have these two parts. You have the E and the F sharp. What we did was, rather than just alternating back and forth for a typical solo section, we tried to make it interesting, and we tried the Shrink and Grow technique. So what's happening is we're starting with the E section, and we're doing a total of 4 E's. But on the fourth one, we're doing the riff. So essentially, the 4 E's would be then it goes to the F sharp, 4 F sharps. So that was 4 and 4. Now we go to 3 E's. And remember, the last one is always the riff. So now the 3 E's is now 3 F sharps. Now to 2 E's. 2 F sharps. And now this last one, we go back to E. It's just the riff because it's only one. So now that we've shrunk the entire arrangement, now we're going to grow. The arrangement's going to grow back to its original forms. And if you followed me this far, not only are you crazy, but you're pretty smart because I'm still trying to figure this thing out. It's an absolutely bizarre concept and something that was a challenge to write and to actually execute. And I feel like a fool sitting here singing it and counting it for you, but it was the best way to sort of describe what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to actually play it for you. Okay, when we hit the E right here, it's going to be the top of the Shrink and Grow section. 3, 4. 2, 3. Riff. 2, 3. Now down to 3. 2. Riff. Now down to 2. Riff. 1. 2. Riff. 1. Unison. Okay, now we're going to grow. That was the one riff. Now 1 F sharp. 1, 2, riff. 1, 2, now up to 3. Riff. Now up to 4. Riff. 2, 3, 4, and there you have it. Through the years, I've done a lot of drum clinics, and at my clinics, if you've ever been to one of them, you know that I spend a lot of time talking about odd time signatures and breaking them down, giving examples of how, 9/8, 7/8, 5/8, and even 16th note subdivisions relate to 4/4 time. And the one example I always give in 16th note subdivisions is grooving in 19/16 time. And it's weird because through the years at my clinics, I've always used that as an example, just arbitrarily. And it turns out that the ending of the song Home ended up having a riff in 1916. So what I'm going to do is explain to you exactly how to understand 1916, the same way I do at my clinics, and then I'll show you how I apply it to this groove in Home. Okay, I'm going to try to take a very large concept and squeeze it down to a very quick, understandable one for the sake of moving forward without taking up too much time on this subject. But the most important thing about odd time signatures is seeing how they relate to 4/4 time. And I always say if you use a drumstick as a sort of musical timeline, you could see how everything relates to 4/4. If you put 4/4 smack in the center, you could see that 3/4 is 1/4 note less. You could see that 5/4 is 1/4 note more. And the same way that you would look at a ruler with inches and half inches and quarter inches, that's the same way you look at music with quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. So for instance, in between 3/4 and 4/4, which could be broken down to eighth notes as 6/8 and 8/8, in between those 3/4 and 4/4, you would find 7/8. In between 4/4 and 5/4, you would find 9/8. So that's how to understand eighth note subdivisions. Now, now talking about 1916, on the surface, somebody would completely be intimidated by that time signature and not know how to approach it. But if you understand it in your head first and figure out the mathematics and how it relates to 4, actually playing it is not that difficult. Basically, 1916, you're going to break it down into 16th notes and see how it relates to 4/4. So 4/4 time could be 4 quarter notes. If you were to break that into eighth notes, you'd have 8 eighth notes. And then if you were to break it into 16th notes, you'd have 16 16th notes. So 4/4 time essentially is the same as 16/16 time. So let me play that for you. So, right there was a simple 4/4 groove, but if you wanted to be technical about it, you can count it as a 16/16 groove. So now, to play something in 1916, all you're going to do is play a 4/4 groove, and then you're going to add 3 extra 16th notes. So if 4/4 is 16/16, 1916 would just be 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1, 2, 3, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1, 2, 3, 1. So let me play that for you. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 1916 as used in the song Home. The number one question I get asked the most, other than, hey dude, why'd you cut your hair, is how the hell do you guys remember all that stuff? So what I'm going to do right now is show you how we remember all that stuff. We have a charting system, and when we're working on writing a song, we'll spend a lot of time working on the arrangement and writing out charts. We have blackboards in the studio, or we'll each have our personal sheets, and besides the actual notation of the songs, the arrangement of the songs is usually just as confusing, if not sometimes more, because our arrangements are sometimes very untraditional. So what I have here is a whole bunch of notes. These are my charts from the making of this album, and what made writing this album even more difficult is that, like I've mentioned, there wasn't much time for reflection. So there was a lot of taking notes and a lot of reading off of charts, trying to remember the arrangements. And right here, this is the big instrumental chart. We knew we wanted to write an instrumental on this album. In fact, we ended up writing two. One was the overture for the album, and then the other was the Dance of Eternity. And the Dance of Eternity basically was a typical Dream Theater instrumental in the tradition of Yitzhak Jam or Erotomania, or even the middle of Metropolis Part 1. And basically, when we write an instrumental, we just try to throw everything in, and we just go for it. There's no rules, and anything goes. And with writing a big album revolved around Metropolis Part 2, we knew that there had to be this incredibly sick instrumental in the middle of Metropolis, the way that there was a crazy instrumental section in the middle of the first Metropolis. In the case of this album, the instrumental section sits pretty much in the middle of the record, and it turned into a whole 6.5-minute piece called The Dance of Eternity. So knowing that we wanted to write this incredibly crazy instrumental, we basically made a list of a lot of the crazy riffs that we had floating around, and this is the Riffs du Jour category. Originally, we had the Metropofest '99. But in any case, we had the list of riffs that we knew we wanted to incorporate, some of which made it, some of which didn't. And then as we went along arranging and writing the song, we ended up with the final menu in this case. And all of our sections are given crazy references. It's not like verse, chorus, bridge, solo. It's UK number 1, piano break, bass break, Meshuggah low, Meshuggah high, Zappa unisons, Cantina, Metallica. They always have references to other bands, sections that things remind us of, Marillion, Genesis. And this is the way that we remember the parts. So in answer to that question, how the hell do you remember this stuff? This is how we remember this stuff. Okay, so this is actually my personal chart for this particular song, The Dance of Eternity, which the working title was song number 7. The entire album was songs 1, song 2, song number 3, so we wrote the entire album. Every song had a number. But in any case, song number 7 was The Dance of Eternity, or the Metropo Mental. But this was my personal chart. This was actually the writing chart and the master chart. But once we got the arrangement down, I created my own chart, and I do this for every one of our songs. So if you were to follow the arrangement of the song, usually I'll have the arrangement name, you know, intro pump, UK number 1, the amount of times. Usually on the left side I'll have the key that the section is in, so I can, you know, refer to it when discussing it with the other band members. And then on the right, you'll see sometimes I'll have numbers or odd time signatures, just a basic chart. I mean, this is obviously amateur notation. If you were to look at Jordan's charts, he actually notates everything. But this is my sort of shorthand way of remembering the arrangements, especially when you're writing the album on the spot in the studio. And to take it a step further, there was a section towards the end of this that got absolutely out of hand with odd time signatures. And this is the actual chart for it. And what I'm going to do is actually count through this section of the song with you. So you could see exactly all of the odd time signatures that are constantly shifting and changing. And this was the actual chart that I used to help me get through the recording of this song. It wasn't easy. So we're going to play through it's sort of the end of the instrumental of the Dance of Eternity, and I'm going to just point along and count out loud and see if you could sort of follow all of the different odd time signatures as we go along. Walk with us, if you will, through the nightmare which we call the Dance of Eternity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is what still gives me nightmares, but there you have it. That's the way to count through the chart and make your way through the Dance of Eternity.
let's see some lights up here. Light the stage up. Let's see this homeboy.
hang this thing back up and it won't hang up on the hook. This is like Spinal Tap. I'm just gonna chuck this. I mean, I can't hang it fast enough. I can't sit it down fast enough. That's it, isn't it?
This is my daughter Melody. I'm going to give her a chance to jam, see if she's better than these two. Okay, time for Daddy to go back to work.